Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Welcome back, bookworms and first-time viewers, to the Books by Adrian author platform and our flagship show, Livestream Sunday. If you are new, my name is Adrian Santiago. I'll be your host today and every day for the next 14 weeks. This is episode 2 of season 3. We have 14 more shows after this one. And I am very, very pleased to have with me today on the second episode of season 3, the notorious Gary Thomas. I can't wait to talk to him about so many things in his journey as a writer. He is currently writing his memoir, and I think it's the perfect time to talk to him about how exactly he got to where he is and how he's done everything that he's done. He's had quite a journey. So we're not going to waste too much time in getting to him today. If you are new here, please consider subscribing. If you would like to participate in the chat, you have to be subscribed. But once you are subscribed, it is immediate, and you can immediately jump in on the chat and enjoy it with all of us. There will be a segment later on in the show where I will go to audience questions, and we'll do a live chat, Q&A. So if you could delineate any questions for Mr. Thomas with a big Q at the beginning, it'll help me to find them throughout the chat as we go, compile them very, very neatly, and ask him the questions when the time comes. You could be watching us on YouTube today. You could be watching us on Facebook. You could be watching us on Twitch. I'm streaming simultaneously to all 3 platforms. I am experimenting. Let's see how all that goes. If anybody has any trouble, let me know. If you participate in the chat at any of those locations, it will show up here as well. But obviously, if you are at any of those other locations, I urge you to jump over to the YouTube and give a like to the video, and maybe even leave a comment at the bottom with letting us know, like what your favorite part of the interview was, or your favorite question that got answered, or whatever. Just tell us what your favorite moment of the interview was. All right, everybody. I think I've bantered on long enough. Let's introduce our guest today. Let's see here. My guest today is the omni-talented Gary Thomas, based in London, UK. Mr. Thomas churns out work like a conveyor belt. He has made 13 short films, including a music video and a half-hour documentary. He recently completed Extra Time, a time travel football film, and that's European football for my American buddies over here. He's brought stage plays to life and even directed a Doctor Who fan film titled Reverence of the Daleks. I can't wait to ask him about that one. His current work in progress is a much-needed memoir of his life and career, and I, for one, can't wait to read more from it. Gary Thomas, welcome to the show. Welcome, Mr. Thomas. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I know that you're across the pond, so we may experience, little moments of lag here and there.
Yeah.
But overall, I think we're going to be running pretty smoothly. I've at least upgraded my microphone just for you. I wanted to have this upgraded last week.
Yeah.
I got it upgraded for this week.
That's good. Yeah.
Much better sound. We're on the come up over here.
Yeah.
Mr. Thomas, why don't you go ahead and take a moment and let everybody know who you are, where you're from, and what you've worked on, just in generalities, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty as we go.
Yeah, generalities. Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Thomas. I'm a writer, director, and filmmaker and playwright. I've made 13 short films over the past few years, mainly with funding, some of it from Arts Council, some of it from other places. And I've also produced plays as well. And yeah, I write about disability. I write about all sorts of things really that interest me, and I'm sure we'll get to that. And I'm also just kind of writing my memoir, as Adrian has said. So that's me.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. Yeah.
You can call me Gary. It's fine.
I can't. I have to call you Mr. Thomas. You're very, very British. I can't help it.
No, it's fine. Yeah, what? We had a carer from my mum come in. Yeah, she was only here for 2 days. So but she called me sir, and it was the weirdest thing. It's like, yeah, don't call me that. Just call me Gary. It's fine.
Yeah, I've gotten to the point where I'm starting to show some grays in the beard and in the hair.
Right.
So I'm starting to get a lot of
Yeah.
sirs. Yeah, and it's. I mean, I'm not getting carded when I buy alcohol. It's weird,
Right.
man.
Yeah. Man, when they don't check you for ID, that's when you know.
Yeah,
That's
it's over.
Man, really.
It's over. Just succumb to time and death and everything.
Embrace it. It's all good, and it's all experience for writers. That's what we need. Experience.
Right on. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Richard has shown up in the chat bright and early. He agrees that I'm old. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, it's not a race, but
younger than me, I'm sure.
We're all getting there.
And that's fine.
So I want to jump right into it because we only have an hour today. So I want to go straight into the interview process. So let's start the first act here.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So, Gary. It's weird. I can't do it.
It's Gary, fine. If I go with it.
Let's start out with your short film, Extra Time. It brings a beloved and challenging sci-fi trope to the most real-world setting that I've ever seen explored with it. Is it important to you that you approach sci-fi and other genre-heavy works with a twist like that on the trope? Can you tell us a little bit about this project specifically?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's written by Mark Lever, who's the writer and producer, and we had I'm trying to think. We had a long kind of going back and forth development process, so we got a lot of feedback on the script as Mark was writing it, which was really useful. And then in the end, I think you get to a point where you want to make, like, this is the script that you're happy with, and this is the script that we're going to shoot. And so I kind of remember that, and it wasn't so much as a huge discussion as much as we kind of automatically knew that we were going to do it because we self-financed it as well between us. So we kind of paid for half each. So that was really good. And then with the real world thing, I think it's really interesting because we kind of looked at the locations, and the locations were all kind of local to us. So I think that really made it, as you say, in the real world. And then, with the story and genres, I think everyone is looking for that twist. And one is different about this. It's kind of Back to the Future bit of a story in that. But, it's that. So what do you do with it and to make it its own standalone film? And I think, it's 18 minutes, 15 minutes. We had a cut that was about 20 minutes originally. So we kind of cut it down, and everyone that's seen it really likes it. It's getting a lot of positive views, and I think that kind of is that going back and forth with the script and taking that idea has really helped it.
I just, while I was watching it, I was just fascinated by the tone of it. The tone is so special, so kind of unique. It's, it has a really hard edge to it, but it's also kind of funny. And so I would almost call it a dark comedy, but it's not necessarily what you would first think of when you hear the genre dark comedy. So it has its own flavor, and I think it's really interesting. I like it a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, definitely. And tone is something that I'm thinking about for my new film, actually. So tone is like really important in a work, and also it's funny you say comedy because Charlie Ross, he actually started out as a comedian. So I cast him in a film that I did called Only One Summer, and then I'm sure there was something else. He did a film called Don't Marry Me, Have Him, which was just his. I wrote it, but it was like his little monologue, and that was kind of fun. And then we did Extra Time together, and we actually shot it over 4 days.
That's it?
All separate days, because we saved up and filmed a day, and then saved up and filmed a day. What I liked about that was each kind of section was in its own location, so that's how we split it up. And it's really kind of pleasing to hear as well that you think the tone is consistent throughout, because that's quite hard when you're not shooting it it's one day after another. We didn't do it like that at all.
Yeah.
But we've kept that. And there was a lot more. I'm pretty sure there was a lot more football in it, soccer for our American friends, in it, and we kind of cut that because it didn't quite look right. It's really hard, and Charlie is a PE teacher.
It's like shooting an action sequence.
Exactly, yeah. And actually, in the very first, in one of the early drafts, we had James Spring getting run over, and we just thought that's going to be too difficult. And then in the end, we had him being shot by a gunman, and the amount of things we had to do just to get like a fake gun and inform the police and all of that stuff. It was a lot of hard work. I don't know which would be simpler, but it was interesting. Kind of you write for the budget and the locations, I guess, but we didn't write with those in mind. I think we kind of thought about it afterwards, and we thought we can do this with this. And I think the most challenging aspect was actually finding the soccer pitch out of all of them, and we eventually did. And on that day, I remember, I think it rained for about 3 hours, like the first 3 hours that day, and we still only finished 1 hour behind. And it rained like 3 or 4 hours, and I don't know how we caught up with it, but we did.
So for shooting these things, organization is paramount. You know,
it's a huge thing. Yeah, exactly, and it's a huge headache. But I don't think anyone's noticed that we've shot like a year apart on most of the days.
I didn't notice. Yeah, that's news to me. So not only is the mood consistent throughout, but like I said, it's kind of unique and kind of special in this particular script. Is that something that you did intentionally, you think? Is that something that, you know, was purposeful in the writing of the script? Did it kind of happen organically with the cast? Like what was that, you know?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it kind of happened organically, a lot of it. Like I remember auditioning for James Spring, and we had one of the actors come down from quite far away to be in a park, and we played a bit of football and everything, but he hadn't learned his script. So he read it on his iPad as he was auditioning, and I couldn't see the connection. Even though they were there together, I couldn't see the connection between him and Charlie in the audition. And so Ben, who actually eventually got the part, submitted a video audition, and he got the part. So yeah, it was really interesting. And I think it kind of happens organically and with the cast that you kind of select. So yeah, I think that kind of comes across as you're kind of planning something. I think you kind of know what it's almost like a shape, like the tone of it is kind of like a shape as well, and you kind of build that shape with the cast that you get, and you think they're going to work well together. And actually, Charlie and Ben got on really well together, which was fun. So we had a lot of fun kind of offset when we weren't shooting. So yeah.
Now, for us over here, you know, American stage actors and American cinema actors tend to stay separate for the most part. There is some crossover. Some, you know, big time actors do some stage play. Same thing for directors. There's some crossover. But for the most part, those are two very different, separate, you know, communities and mediums in which to tell stories. But in the UK, from what I've gathered, it is much more of a melding of the two. You know, most directors and writers who are doing movies over there are also doing stage plays. So how did you get into, you know, doing both? Am I correct in assuming that it's kind of part of the culture over there?
I think so, yeah. I think because obviously we don't make as much TV as America, so we don't have as many channels. So yeah, so I think people just want to be working, especially if you're creative. So you'll take theatre and you'll take TV work if it comes, film work if it comes is great. But yeah, and for me, I wrote, when I wrote my memoir, I actually put, because Arts Council, I had funding from Arts Council for my memoir, and they always ask about the audience, and I didn't really know what that would be if I'm writing a book. Like it was like a bit of an R&D application, I guess, so like a development project, which I got funding for the first time. And so I created this show called Hidden, which was a monologue. And I thought, if that becomes a theatre show, it's based on my own experiences of mental health, but that's where I can get the audience, and I can put that into festivals. And that's what I did, and I got the funding to do that. And within the application, I could answer then where the audience would come from. So there was specifically a disability-led festival of all art forms, and that's where I premiered Hidden, a local theatre. So yeah, so that's how I kind of really first kind of did theatre.
That's fascinating. So, in other words, using theater to build the audience to
Exactly,
bring over
yeah,
to film. That's
yeah,
nice.
and to the
Nice.
book as well. So yeah, yeah,
Which is ultimately what I'm doing right here with this channel.
exactly,
I'm
yeah,
putting out my first novel. Nobody knows who I am. I want it to do well.
yeah. Nobody knows who you are yet.
Nobody knows who I am yet, and
Yeah.
I want to sell books, so I have to build the audience first. So like that's kind of the whole inception of this whole author platform. So it's interesting that the same kind of mentality for bringing your audience kind of worked out over there.
Yeah.
Now I'm living in Gainesville, Florida, but before that I was from Orlando.
Yeah.
And your second stage play, The 49, is about the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting, which is very, very recent in my memory, and touched a lot of people that I know and love. So, first of all, thank you so much for producing such a work. But if I can ask, what's your connection to the tragedy? What's your what was the catalyst for you taking on that project?
Yeah. So I think for me, I didn't really know anyone directly involved. But for me, I had such a reaction to it because I am gay, and it really affected me. And then my mum mentioned it because they talked about it at the tennis. A couple of friends at the boxing club mentioned it, and then I had no other conversation about it. And so for me, it became a way of having a conversation about it, and I need to kind of talk about this. And then actually, I don't want to mention this other thing, but what was happening in the UK at that time was this thing called Brexit, and we're never going to mention that again. But everyone else was kind of consumed by that, and so not necessarily what was going on in other parts of the world. But for me, I had such a kind of visceral reaction to it that, and then I felt that I couldn't talk to anyone about it. That kind of made me want to look into it, and writing became part of that, and I was able to do that when we started having read-throughs of the script, and online I was able to talk about it and tell people about that. So yeah,
that's awesome. And I understand your connection to it now a little better. I just remember living through it in kind of a haze because I was already over here in Gainesville, and I had friends who were still living in Orlando, and family as well who weren't necessarily living in Orlando but could come and go at any point. They could have been there and I didn't know, and that would have been a place that they would have been. And so on Facebook that whole week was just people like letting everyone know, hey, I'm okay, I'm registered safe or whatever. And that was my first experience with that.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I don't know if it was the first. It probably wasn't, but it feels like the first big event that social media played such an important part of it, because I was kind of watching it on, like, I remember seeing, I think it was the FBI or the local police, they tweeted that the shooter in the nightclub is dead. And that was like their tweet, and it was just so weird to see that in such a public kind of forum, especially from the UK. Because we don't have the culture so much of 24-hour news, I mean, we do kind of now, but I hadn't certainly grown up with that. But yes, that was kind of really interesting. And I just felt really, really strongly about it. And I think it was because I've been to clubs like that, in London. And we had over here, we had like the Admiral Duncan bombing, which was a long time ago now, maybe nearly 30 years ago. And that was kind of a similar thing. But with Orlando, what happened at the Pulse nightclub, it was shocking. And at the time, certainly, it was somebody would go into a nightclub and kill people because they're like me, they're gay. or bisexual or whatever, and
Yeah.
that was kind of really struck me. And I guess, thank God, we had President Obama at the time who actually went over there and did that speech and said, one
Mhm.
attack on any community is an attack on all of us. And yeah, so
Yeah, I remember, for example, before that, the movie theater shooting during the Dark Knight
yeah,
Rises premiere, that was big news. But social media had been growing in its connection to these tragedies and us like
yeah,
using it. But I remember Pulse being the first time that people were using that thing of registering safe,
yeah,
letting
yeah,
people know, hey, I'm a
exactly.
person that you probably are worried about because I might
Yeah,
have been there. I wasn't there. I'm okay.
yeah,
And I just remember that being huge to me. Like I
yeah,
was okay,
definitely.
like everything is different. Like
Yeah,
the things that we can do now to communicate with each other and
yeah.
and figure these things out is crazy. How are these American, and I don't want to spend too much time on this. I would like to get back to you, but it's a fascinating topic to me. What is it like being all the way over there in London when these, big mass shootings are happening in America? I don't hear too
Yeah.
much about anything like that happening on your side. So I wonder how you guys react to the news coming from America and how often it's been coming.
Yeah, I mean it's unfortunate, isn't it? That was like the worst mass shooting in history, and then in a matter of months, it was no longer the worst. And I think that was America. We have different gun laws over here, but there was still like a recent shooting, I think in Portsmouth,
Mm.
where my nephew went to college,
Yeah.
went to university. So again, that was kind of weird. And but there isn't as much, and I think because we're it's like I feel like I want to kind of protest about a lot of what's going on in COVID and stuff, and I don't think we're as vocal as our American friends either. So I think people just kind of accept more. They don't go out and riot. They don't kind of very often. I mean, there have been kind of protests and riots, but I feel like there's a different sensibility um, of people over here, I guess. I'm not an expert in any way,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but
Neither am I.
yeah, yeah, it's interesting that
Yeah.
difference. But yeah, very. And I started watching Sophie. It's a documentary on Netflix about the murder of a French journalist. But they were saying in that documentary, like that was the first murder that really ever happened in that town. This is a place in Ireland, and then kind of the town was changed because that's like the first time they had a big event like that.
Hmm.
And when you think about it, this is like 20, 30 years ago. But there aren't that many places left that haven't experienced a degree of violence. And
Mm.
but I think over here there are still some places that are kind of you can kind of hide away and they're relatively safe. Like I feel quite safe. I'm very fortunate. I feel quite safe where I live. So yeah, so I think it's different. Had I if I lived in London, I might not feel as safe. But yeah, I think it's interesting, definitely.
Yeah. Well, in order to switch gears a little bit and lighten the
Yeah,
mood, I want to remind the chat now that we have some more people coming in. Go ahead and ask some questions for me to ask Gary Thomas here on your behalf in the third act of the show. Delineate them with a big Q and ask as many questions as you like, and I'll go through the chat and find them and ask Mr. Thomas here in a little bit.
can I just
Gary.
say, as a screenwriter, I love that this is in acts. I think it's great.
Oh yeah, right. Acts, chapters. I probably should have
Yeah,
gone as a novelist. I probably should have gone with chapters.
yeah,
I'm not really very
acts
forward
are
thinking
great.
with that kind of thing. So, thank you for sending me a copy of your memoir.
Yeah,
I wasn't able to read the whole thing. Obviously, I have kids.
yeah,
So, but what I
adds a
did
lot
read,
there.
really highlighted how sort of important your journey as a writer, as a
Yeah.
director, and as a person is. Can you enlighten us a little bit on why you decided to write your memoirs, why now, and why as a book rather than one of your other mediums?
Yeah, so I've had quite a few, I guess you'd call them false starts at writing the memoir, and I would find something that was about one thing, and it was not the right place to start it. But yeah, essentially the memoir traces me being born with a flat nose and a cleft palate, which is a hole in the roof of my mouth, and I couldn't talk properly until I was 9. And I've had a lot of surgery growing up. I think 13 operations on my face, and I used to say like the world and their mate making fun of me because that's what it felt like at the time. And so so going through that, and it felt like such a big thing. And the book covers much more than that. It also covers my journey as an artist and how I recovered from all of that. But yeah, it felt like it was a very big subject to tackle in like a film or a screenplay. So a book felt right. And also I think the way that I wanted to write it, prose, actually felt right for that kind of writing. And I always say, like, I don't know if I started diary writing when I was 14, and I don't know if I became pressed when I started writing or I was depressed anyway and then started writing about it. So it could kind of happen either way. But yeah, so there were diary writings, and then actually when I found the prose stuff, actually really annoyingly, I decided really early on that actually the diaries weren't that helpful in terms of the writing of the book, but I could go back and then write it as I've written it as prose, because I had all the dates and all the info in those diaries. But that was my kind of ideal dream as a writer. I could publish my diaries, and it didn't quite turn out like that. And I think, again, as you grow older, the diaries are kind of have a different aspect, or they take on a different meaning. So I kind of wanted to write it in prose from scratch in a way. So that's kind of, and it felt like a big subject. So a memoir, a book felt right for it.
Nice. How have some of those, especially the physical challenges, your cleft palate and so on, in your youth, how have they influenced your stories and your storytelling, if at all? Like, how has that infused into your style in writing?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've always, and more recently, I kind of realized I've always had a thing about the writer's voice. And obviously I couldn't talk properly until I was 9. So I have a big thing about my voice. And now I feel like actually it doesn't just have to be my writer's voice. It can be my actual physical voice that I can make heard. So that's been really interesting, that kind of journey of realizing that I do have a voice and that I can now use it in many different ways. And everyone has a voice. So that's been interesting. And then, just kind of, I feel like I'm very determined because I've just been through so much shit, quite frankly, that I kind of know how to battle and know when to give up if I need to or whatever. And as I'm older, I know when to take naps, which really help. But yeah, it's interesting. I just think it's made me very determined to kind of get things done, and because I kind of have that built-in rejection when everyone was making fun of me, that now I almost like don't care about what people think or what people say about me. I can just kind of brush that off because I have had that experience as a child. I wouldn't recommend that's the way of doing it, but if it happens, then
it points to a truth that I learned as well. Before the pandemic put a few extra pounds on me, I used to roll jujitsu. I used to train jujitsu.
Okay.
And, one of the things that it does for you is it teaches you how to be comfortable in very uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
And by uncomfortable situations in jujitsu, you might have an opponent who's twice your size and weight with his knee on your belly, and you cannot breathe and you cannot move, and you have to remain calm and think about what to
exactly. You have to relax.
And so if you are able to do that in the most difficult of circumstances, then when you're in the real world and something difficult happens, you're able, to maintain your calm and think things through. So that's exactly what I'm feeling you're talking about here, is this sort of like callousing that happens to us, where we go through so much crap that it's like, okay, well, I can just handle it now.
Exactly.
Bring on the crap, everything's fine.
Definitely.
Now there's a turning point in your youth where you have several surgeries, if I read that correctly, and your quality of life, from what I understand, really improved after that. Can you talk a little bit about lessons learned during that transitional period there?
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, it's really interesting. Hindsight is great. I just wish it would happen sooner. You know, but yeah, it's like I've always I thought that um, the physical thing, and it kind of it very much was, and this is the journey that I had to go through because I wouldn't really listen to anyone. So yeah, I was in and out of hospital. I had 3 operations on the roof of my mouth. I don't know why I had 3. And then I had skin graft on my nose when I was 10. And then my mum wanted me to go through high school. So that's where I had the bullying and people making fun of me and everything. And then by the time I reached high school, I was very depressed and I couldn't cope and I couldn't see a future for myself at all. And I just started bunking off the last couple of years of high school. And then when I left high school, I screamed at my mum basically until she gave in and let me see my surgeon. And then he did fix the other side of my nose. And then I had to go to the dentist because my teeth had to be sorted before they could do anything else. And yeah, and so that second skin graft was really interesting because I remember because everyone made fun of my nose and calling me flat nose and elephant man and squash nose, and then when I would say something, they would make fun of how I sounded like. So I stayed quiet, like for the first 17 years of my life.
Just
I would only talk, yeah, and I would only talk to my mum. And but that's the thing: if you're silent, then you hope they don't notice you. So that was kind of yeah. And then I had the second skin graft on my nose, and I didn't think that's what it would take. And I remember leaving the hospital really clearly, and these 2 kind of good-looking guys because that's what I was obsessed with. Like everyone was really good looking at that point because like I had this, you know, or not this, but you know, yeah. So these 2 good-looking guys came kind of walked past me and they never said anything and they never made fun of me. And I was like really genuinely shocked. And so that whatever you call it, it's kind of attention basically, but that kind of stopped overnight. And I kind of didn't expect to be shocked or miserable about that, but it was just a complete change.
Yeah.
And so that obviously kind of does something to me. But then I think there was a few months where I still didn't get it. And then by the time, so I had surgery when I was 18, I think, made less so I had my jaw brought forward and cheek implants, and the cheek implants were removed because they were too painful. And then I was at some point I think I was 18. I went into a clinic for people with mental health issues. My dad had a private payment plan, so it was kind of like one of the ones where all the celebrities go. But I don't think I saw any celebrities. But I wasn't ready to like learn anything at that point. And then maybe 4 or 5 years after that, I went into therapy by my own choice because then I was like, wow, these things called feelings, what are they? Fucking hell. And yeah, I realized I had to deal with this. And actually, Kenneth Branagh made Frankenstein, the film. And then I read the book, the original Mary Shelley book, and I was literally like, fucking hell, I should stop blaming everyone because the monster kind of takes responsibility at the end. And I was like, so yeah, and that book, I mean, put me into therapy, quite frankly. But yeah, it was like reading that and then a lot of realizations that it isn't just about looks, it isn't just about, and it wasn't superficial because I did have people making fun of me, but there's other stuff as well. And I wasn't happy with the other stuff because I wasn't confident enough. I didn't talk to anyone. And instantly after the surgery, there was a period where I was very happy, but that only lasted 6 months. And then I kind of began to spiral back down into depression. So then, yeah, it wasn't like the quick fix that I thought it would be, or the longer lasting fix that was dealing with the feelings and everything else. And talking it through.
Yeah, the the surgery certainly helped with the physical side of things, but all that emotional, toil is still in there. You still got to deal with it.
There if you don't talk about it.
Well, depression is something that affects a lot of us and often. So how, other than therapy, how do you, sort of battle your depression, or do you still struggle with it? Any tips and tricks, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so not a qualified doctor, but I feel like even now, like I've been pretty on an even keel for quite a few years now, and I think that is down to work, and I've become more confident over time. both with myself and with my work, and definitely writing. Like I really kind of suffocate if I haven't written for a few days, so I don't allow those days where I don't do much writing. But yeah, definitely when I was like when I was in high school, and everyone says this, you're British, you went to secondary school. It's like, no, my school was actually called a high school. I don't know why, but it was actually definitely called a high school. But I went spunked off. I just kind of, again, stayed silent and didn't talk to anyone. I would bunk off the afternoon and just, yeah, just cried and walked to the park and there was no one else there. And that's not a good way of dealing with things. So yeah, then I just learned to kind of talk about stuff, and I do feel really fortunate. Like now, I have some very good friends who are all part of the gay community mostly, and also not part of the gay community. But that is, I found my community of friends, and that's been really useful. And also talking about it to people and finding the right people. I actually did a project last year. I'm still editing the subtitles because it's taken ages, but it's called Propulsion, and it was interviewing people who have disabilities who work in the arts and how do they deal with their own access issues and everything. And just kind of having that project, having that funding to do that project. I've tried like 4 times, I think, to get that same project funded, and last year it got funded. So that's again that determination. It was really interesting. Just now, I know a lot of people I can go and talk to and say, "How did you deal with this?" And it's having that communication with other people really helps, and also having that communication with complete strangers also helps as well. And the other thing is just sleep. And I'm very again, I am fortunate, but I can have a nap every now and again, and when it all gets too much. And that's yeah, and that's kind of really important. And I that's the thing. There's always been this raging battle in my head between how much I want to do and how much I can physically and emotionally cope with. And so it's just kind of planning that and understanding what I want to do next, what I want to and when. And
Yeah.
I haven't quite got there yet, and it will always be an ongoing piece of work to do with myself, and it's managing those expectations as they arise. So yeah, so I feel like yeah, definitely talking, definitely finding your tribe, people you can talk to. If that's other writers, if that's online, that's anything like that helps.
Right on. I noticed that after 2012, your project output kind of jumped, and you've had a productive career since then. What do you attribute this increase in productivity and creativity to?
Yeah, I feel like I'm trying to remember because I hadn't. I think a lot of it is Arts Council because in the UK we have the Arts Council which fund a lot of artists, and they funded me. 7 successful applications. There have been other applications that weren't successful, but I had yeah, my first successful application. My first application to Arts Council was successful in 2005. I think that was a bit of an anomaly. Then my second application wasn't successful, and then I kind of got bits of money through other places. It was all kind of arts funding, but through other organizations. And I went on courses, and I thought I don't want to go to film school because it's going to be way too expensive. And so I just did a lot of short courses, and that's how I learned. And then 2012 was the Olympics happening in the UK. And so there was a lot of money for the Olympics and everything. And they made art such a big thing. And that kind of really inspired me to kind of move forward with my artistic life and journey. So yeah.
Nice. When do you expect your memoir to release?
That's the thing. I'm not sure what I want to do with it yet. I think it's maybe needs another rewrite. It's interesting, isn't it? Each thing that you do like this is the whole person's job. And then writing it is a whole person's job, and then marketing is a whole person's job. So it's like, oh my god, I'm so tired. And then, but yeah, I'm kind of. A friend actually said, I think more people have read my book than actual published novels, because there has been kind of a pool of friends and writer friends who have read it, and they've all had some really good things to say about it. So yeah, I think it's one more pass, and then I do want to get it out there. It's kind of scary as well, like because I definitely want to try and go down the traditional route of publishing, but I know that Amazon and the indie route is also valid. So yeah, I kind of really want to I'd love to try the traditional publishing route. And then so this year I've been kind of sending it to agents and not really getting anything. So then wondering, okay, what's happening, and do I need to change it and everything? So yeah, I started the process definitely by sending it to agents this year.
Yeah.
I actually got a rejection from one on my birthday, and that was the same day as lockdown over in the UK as well.
No.
So work phone to tell me we weren't meeting anymore, and then I got a rejection from an agent. Like, well,
talk about a bad mental health day. That's
exactly. Yeah, I'm literally going to bed. Yeah,
that's a rough one. You need a big nap after that one.
Yeah, definitely.
I was gonna jump into questions about your process, since we have a topic to cover. I'm gonna kind of meld them together. So let's hop into today's topic here. You write screenplays, stage plays, and now a book. Let me scroll down here. What's a challenge that you've encountered writing your memoirs that hasn't come up in your film and stage play scripts and whatnot?
Yeah, so I think I this is because I'm determined and everything. I want to change the question that you just asked. I found actually the stage plays the hardest. I think prose. Because thanks to Arts Council again, I literally went to a hotel in Manchester and I had a week where I just wrote the book, because that was like the first 30,000 words, and I'd written 10,000 words already. But I found that really, really kind of, I guess, cathartic and really good. And I found I could write prose really easily. And it's the stage plays, especially when I do monologues, I find that the hardest out of all of them. Because you've got this time to fill in these blank pages, and it's literally kind of, I don't know what's going to happen next. And that's why Hidden was really good. So it was my first stage play. It ended up being 35-page monologue, which is about 45 minutes on stage. But it was really good. But writing that on my own was kind of like, I literally don't know. And I kind of stress a lot about minor details, like the time that it's taken this character to do something, or the timeline of the story, and stuff that I probably don't really need to worry about as much, but I kind of stress over that even in like a monologue. But I found definitely the monologue and the stage plays the hardest. And with the 49 writing that, that's a three-hander, but that started out as a monologue as well. I stopped writing it because I didn't want to write the scenes when they were in the club, because I knew it would be hard for me to write. And actually it wasn't that hard for me to write, but I felt it after I'd finished it. Like I really felt it, like the sadness and the scale of what had actually happened, because the last 12 pages of that script are all transcript from YouTube videos and interviews with the survivors and everything. And so I actually didn't have a problem writing it, but I did when I finished it. I was like, it was like a release for me. But yeah, I find stage plays definitely harder than prose or screenplays.
Richard is recommending the Amazing Query List playlist. The Amazing Query playlist series by Garrett Laurie.
That's the other thing about my first sort of 5 agent emails. They were like all too long. They were like a page. And it's like, okay, that's part of the problem. Cut it down. Yeah.
So, what's your first draft process like between these different mediums? Talk a little bit about like the inception of an idea and creating a first draft.
Yeah, it does change and it doesn't change. The inception is nearly always a dream. Like I made a film called The Dog in the Palace back in 2012. That was about the Olympics. That was an entire dream in split screen. The Queen died at the end in the original dream. I did not do that. I did not put that in the film. But yeah, so that came to me as a dream. There's a relatively new idea I got. I saw the trailer really, really quickly when I had the idea, like 2 minutes of really quite funny scenes back to back. And I thought, I want to write that thing. So I always start with a log line. That's really important. And I'm a writer that needs to have an outline. So I can't write without an outline. And yeah, so that's really good. And then I always want to jump to pages too quickly, sometimes even with an outline. So I'm trying to avoid that and trying to do the work up front now. And more recently, I've worked with someone who's really great. I don't know if I can name check her. She's a script editor. So yeah, Pila Alessandra. But yeah, she was like, I would write the first 25 pages and then she would feedback on them. And then I'd rewrite those and write the next 25 pages. And I found that a really interesting way of working because our conversations kind of became the outline of what I needed to do. And I went in there with a completely different idea. And I came out because I wanted to write a prince and princess thing. Of course I do. And I still do. But, you know, her comments were like, that's kind of been done a lot. So what's the original take on that? And I found this, and it was about the House of Lords in the UK, because there aren't many stories about that. And yeah, and the discussions became kind of the outline, but running 25 pages at a time for a feature, I think is a really interesting idea, and I really enjoyed doing it. And I think I might kind of carry on doing that even. It kind of, I mean, I can stop and feedback on like my own 25 pages, which I think will be the next kind of thing. But yeah, I think writing certain pages at a time, I think is really good. And then you can double check that all the beats are in the right places and everything. I love the save the cat method and the outline, because I feel like I can remember those beats in like a pitch meeting, possibly. But yeah, so yeah, I love save the cat, and I use that, and I tend to kind of just fill out those beats, and
Yeah.
that becomes the outline.
I do the same thing for my outline. I use the outline marked out in the screenwriter's Bible.
Right? Yeah,
So it'll give you 7 turning points, which
yeah. I
are
think I got
often
that
like
one.
5
Yeah, yeah,
acts.
yeah,
Yeah. So the setup, catalyst, big event, pinch, crisis, showdown, and
yeah,
realization.
yeah.
And I just
See,
outline 7 points, and I get a whole
yeah.
story out of that.
Yeah, that really scares me because I'm like 7 points. I don't know if that's enough for a screenplay. I don't know how you can turn that into a full thing, and so that's why I like the 15 beats.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm always worried, even with the full outline. Like I sometimes run out of pages. I run out of outline for the pages that, so I need to go back and so yeah. So now I am kind of doing a lot more work up front before I get to the pages, which I think is really important.
Nice. Yeah, I often find that I have to go back to my outline and kind of
Yeah,
fill it in a little more when
yeah,
I run into like walls, when you're
yeah,
writing the actual
yeah, definitely.
chapters.
Yeah.
Let's go to the chat for some more in this. Let's see here. First up, of course, he was first in the door. We got Richard.
Yay.
Gary, how did you adapt and react to the more technical aspects of your sci-fi films? Do you see yourself as a technical or actor-centric director when on set?
Cool, that's a good question. I like the technical aspects of it, but I'm there with the actors. I I when I audition, I tend to cast. I feel like I have a very good casting head on me as well. So, and it's only happened a few times that an actor will give the same look or say something in the same way that I've had in my head, and those are the actors that have got the part. But you can't really plan that because they haven't we haven't spoken about that, so they'll just come in and I'll see them audition. So that's kind of quite hard to plan, but it has happened a few times. And then I'm there with the actors and looking at their performance. I'm behind the monitor, but like I mean, even on the football day, these things will happen, and like we had a monitor, but then it kind of went down, and so you're relying on the camera operator. So that was really interesting because I couldn't look and see the shot, but I kind of knew and I could see the monitor on the camera. But yeah, I kind of feel like I know when I've got a good take, when I'm happy with a take, and that's the strength I had, and that's why theatre is really different. So I've always used other directors in theatre. So yeah, so that's kind of an interesting process watching someone direct theatre. But yeah, I kind of feel like I very much work with the actors, and but also I love it when the actors have their own ideas and something will be somebody will come up with something. I just say it's so much simpler than what we were going to do, and you take the actor's idea and it kind of becomes their own as well, which I love.
Do you still have difficulties getting your creative side across in dealing with disabilities?
Yeah, I guess getting. Do you mean actually doing the creative writing and doing the work? I guess. Yeah, tiredness is a big thing. Fatigue is huge. So yeah, so I kind of it's basically I kind of work this out. I don't think this is an exaggeration, but I look after my mum as well. It's basically 3 hours in the day where I'm not tired, and then the rest of it I'm just kind of catching up with myself. And then I write at night time, so I have like a dining room because it's further away from everything. We don't live in a mansion or anything; it's just down the other end of the hall. Other end of the
Wait a
hall.
minute, wait a minute,
Um,
wait a minute. You don't live in a mansion? You're
no,
British.
because I said,
Every
because no,
British
I
person
know,
lives in
right?
a
I mean, oh
mansion.
my God, yeah. I'm related to Maggie Smith. I'm totally not really at all. Um, but um, but yeah, it's kind of. I think for me, it's just planning and like even now, I want to write and I'm not writing, so yeah, it's kind of managing my time and eating diet. I will like have a fruit salad or whatever, and that'll give me more energy. And then about 9 or 10 o'clock, I will start writing again, and I will have enough energy. I tend to write at night time. That works for me really well. So yeah, so as long as I'm awake for it, then it's good. If I'm not awake, then it definitely becomes harder.
All right. Gary, would you publish recordings of your plays online or as part of a show reel?
Yeah, I don't know about this. The whole kind of audio on a show reel thing, I think
Yeah.
is really interesting because like actors have like voiceover reels, I guess, but they're either one or the other. So yeah, and then I guess one of the things I could do and I haven't done, I guess, is to put them out as a podcast and then just send them to like industry people.
Like a
So
radio
that
play?
yeah, so like Hidden was a monologue, but that I just put that out as an audio version of it, and then send that to agents and stuff. They can listen to it on the train or wherever. So that might be quite a interesting thing to do. I feel like it's easier maybe to listen to something than to read like a 35-page script. So yeah, so I've often kind of wondered about that. I did a performed reading of a screenplay back in 2012. I did a lot in 2012, and that was really good. And yeah, there's audio of that. So yeah, it's kind of interesting what I would do with that. But yeah, there's a lot of content there that I've created, so it's interesting.
I've, I dream of someday writing a stage play. I have no idea what it would be about right now, but I want to write one
Yeah.
eventually. All right. So Richard's getting cheeky here. Does a Dalek count as an actor or a technical element?
I think this is interesting because actually the Dalek. So in reverence of the Daleks, I believe
Mhm.
Richard is referring to. This was
I
our
would
Doctor
assume,
Who
yeah.
fan film, which Richard wrote and Mark produced. Richard produced and wrote, and Mark was the camera operator, the DOP. And the Dalek, I mean, obviously it had an operator. Sorry, it's not a real Dalek. Um, but yeah, it was interesting. And then the Dalek would add a couple of lines, like or repeat a couple of lines that weren't that weren't written as repeated in the script. But when you watch it or you're there on set listening to it, you're going, oh, actually that works really well because it kind of like adds to the evil, you know. And
Mm,
so there was a couple of times when that happened, and then I would argue that yeah, the person operated and the voice of the Dalek is the actor, but then
yeah.
you have to have enough space for the actual physical Dalek to move around. But
Yeah.
just seeing that was like really spooky. I think we used it. We had a shot where it came from a corridor, came from like a lift entrance, and then came around the corridor, and it's just like really spooky, and it just looks so good, you know. Yeah, and then you have the voice of the Dalek sounding like a Dalek as well.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, I feel like that's both. I'm gonna, yeah, say that's both.
It- it's a twofer.
Yeah, definitely.
Colin Clark says, "Ah, yes, my mansion,
Yeah, yeah.
Clarky
I know,
Towers."
right? I bet he's neighbours with Maggie Smith at least.
What sort of plans do you have for marketing your book and or any of your other works? What's marketing like for you?
Yeah, so this is like a whole nother person's job, and I haven't quite managed it. We always put it in the budget for marketing when I get funding, and I do want to do that. Listen, we do it, but it becomes kind of like another way of doing things. So, like with the 49, the theatre did kind of a lot of the work, and I did a lot of the work on social media and stuff, and that was really turned out really well. And that was interesting because we did like a mini tour, and we did it in London for 3 weeks, and then we did 2 shows in Brighton. And the first night in Brighton, we had one person turn up. She was like crying at the end. I think she really enjoyed it. And then we kind of had a really good house for the second night. So that was really good. So you get the cast and the crew to kind of tweet about it and tell them that you're working on this stuff. So yeah, so I want to get much better at marketing. I feel like I've already drawn the line at Clubhouse because I can't cope with like another social media thing. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's like no, but yeah, Instagram and yeah, and I definitely want to kind of work with a marketing person. I kind of had and we did for Hidden as well, but that wasn't a great experience. So yeah, you kind of pay people and you want them to do the job, and then they don't for whatever reason. Then you think, oh, could have just done it myself, and that's the danger that it kind of doesn't reach as much people as it could have done if you got the right person. So I think it's a real challenge, isn't it?
Hmm.
So yeah, and that's the thing. I love Twitter. Twitter's like my blog basically. But yeah, but I also have a blog on Disability Arts Online, which I should update more often. Yeah,
I think we all have, as authors running online platforms, we all have stuff
yeah,
that we should be posting on more often. It's
yeah,
just there's just so much stuff.
yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
so let's wrap up with the final question for you. What piece of advice would you give to a new writer working on what they hope is their first professional work? What's
Yeah,
what's what's the nugget of advice you have?
the big thing. I saw this on Twitter. It was like TV commissioner, somebody, oh no, a book commissioner working for one of the publishers. But she had the word aspiring in her biography,
Mm,
aspiring writer. They were like, do not use that word. If you're a writer, you're a writer. Like, don't use the word aspiring. You might not get paid for your first thing or whatever. Like, nobody got paid ever for their first thing that they
but
wrote.
you're a
I don't
writer.
think, yeah. But you got to write it, and then that becomes a sample. I'm working with a writer who's working on American TV show, and she's got like 5 spec scripts, all in a similar genre. But it's like that's her script, and that's what she's been sending out, and she's now working in TV because
Mm,
she's written those scripts. So yeah, don't use the word aspiring. You're a writer, and also kind of plan your time. I write a scene in a day, and that's enough. And you can write like another scene or a couple of pages, and it builds up, and it will build up. You don't have to write 100 pages of something in like 2 weeks because that's crazy. And there's a thing on YouTube as well. I'm sure there's more than one, but I wrote a script in 48 hours. That's fine, but why? Why did you do that? And why are you showing off about it on YouTube? I was like, I don't need to do that. I
yeah.
really don't need to do that. I possibly could, but I just don't. And I did kind of try that, and I did a pitching thing late last year, and it was really great. And I pitched like 5 executives, and it was great. And nobody requested the script because I'd done the very wrong thing, and also never do this. I pitched the version of the script that I hadn't rewritten yet, and the last executive that I pitched to requested the script, and I was like, no. And I tried to write it, and I got to like page 48, and I'm like, I'm just going to ignore it because I can't. That was like a wasted opportunity. I should have finished it and then
Mm,
pitched it.
mm.
But yeah, so the things like that you kind of learn as you go. But yeah, try and learn in like a training session as well, rather than like an actual industry stuff, like things like Adrian's, got a back catalogue of these shows. So watch as much as you can when you can and learn different things. There's always going to be a different process that someone has. So work in a way that you work best. And if that's 1 page a day, that's absolutely fine. Don't be pressured by anyone else in the industry. We're all at different levels and we're all at different speeds, and that's fine.
Wise words, man.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna give you the solo layout. Tell the people at home where they can find you. Your links are down below. But if there's something coming up that you want them to know about, or your newsletter, go ahead and just pitch away.
Yeah, so you can follow me at GS Thomas Writer, both on Twitter and Instagram. I'm on Facebook as facebook.com/film on film. That's my company account. That will you get news of all my forthcoming productions. And yeah, the next thing is hopefully a feature documentary, which is funded by the Arts Council, and that's about my mum and Alzheimer's. So look out for that. I'll be posting images and trailers for that very soon. And yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you very, very much, Gary Thomas, for joining us today. Thank you to everybody who showed up in the chat and gave us some questions to ask. And for everybody who's watching this on the replay, thank you for showing up. Give us a like, give us a comment down below. Mr. Thomas, stick around. We're going to go
Sure.
and record our podcast. So just sit tight for a second.
Yeah,
Everybody, if you want more from...
Oh,
my pleasure, of course. For everybody at home, if you want more from Mr. Gary Thomas here, come back on Thursday on this same channel. You will have a video podcast episode. And if you prefer the audio only version, it's available on iTunes and Spotify and all the big ones. So wherever you want to get it from, go and get it. It's the Books by Adrian podcast. We're going to go record that now. So for everybody at home, once again, thank you so very much for being here today, and I hope that you're here next Sunday for Miss Alex Wolf. We're going to be having a very interesting conversation with her, so do not miss that. And we are out.
thanks.
It sound right, boys.